Hi, it's Dave, and last night I spent a couple of hours, probably about 3 hours, doing something I've been not looking forward to, which was putting the BMS back on the batteries. And there we go. So that's my custom BMS wiring that I did, God, probably feels like a year ago now. Difficult to put back on here because I imagine all these cables wanting to touch contacts on the batteries and short circuit things, so I had lots of tissue paper covering things up and protecting, but that's the battery pack now in, all coppered together, all with the BMS on, and it's interesting because then I didn't really think about it, but I went to bed last night and suddenly realised that all I've got to do is put the two high voltage cables on and the car will go on the road. So I'm going to just do a ton of diagnostics now. You know, I've got to test that I've got the high voltage cables in the right place, that I'm getting continuity, there's no high resistives, there's no crossovers, no short circuits. I just want to check everything, check on my wiring diagrams, probably review some of my old videos as well that show the wiring, just to make sure everything is spot on, because the last thing I want to do is connect the high voltage stuff up here and blow it up, because I haven't got any replacement parts and it will make me quite sad. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to spend this evening now, probably a couple of hours, just testing, get the 12 volt system back online, test the relays, check all that's working, check continuity, then plug the high voltage in and, well, hopefully spin the wheels up on the stand. So that's what I'm going to go for, and I'll speak to you in a minute. Morning. So I was playing for quite a few hours last night, looking at the car, testing it, making sure it wasn't faulty, just before I bang in all the high voltage, just didn't want to blow anything up, and found a fault, which I kind of didn't expect, to be honest. So quite a lot of diagnostics later, trying to work out what's going on. I have worked it out, well, with the thanks to James from the London EV group that I'm a member of. Thank you very much, James, because your input was invaluable, and it was really obvious in the end as well, which is a bit silly. But I'll tell you what the fault was first. I was checking the 12 volt systems and the high voltage systems, checking they were working, checking there was no leaking to earth and that voltages were all in the right places. And I found that I had a high voltage potential difference between the battery pack and the aluminium box. So if I show you here, I did a check between the positive here and the battery box, and I had about 80 volts. And the negative and the battery box, again, I had about 80 odd volts, and it would go 80 volts and it would trickle all the way down to zero. It was a bit strange, but obviously not right. So had a little bit of a meltdown, was thinking, well, have I got a cable kinked, you know, a little nick in a cable somewhere in the high voltage and it's just seeping through to the chassis. Can't leave it like that, need to find out what's going on because, well, it's dangerous if nothing else. So a bit downhearted, but as James pointed out, he said, well, all the battery cells are wired back to the BMS. And I was like, oh, what's the last thing I did, which was connect up the BMS. And of course the BMS, hopefully there's enough light in here, I put here, and it's bolted to the chassis. So clearly the BMS is earthed internally to the wiring. It just allows a little bleed to the chassis, which I just don't want. So today's first job is going to be to obviously unbolt this and 3D print a cradle, put the cradle in the bolt holes and secure it somehow, and then put this into the cradle and screw it into the cable again. Not really worked out how I'm going to do it, but just to replace that so it's then got an isolation between the chassis and BMS. So then hopefully when I plug it back in, hopefully it will all work and have no bleed. But I'm really chuffed that I did those tests, because that could have been catastrophic, not catastrophic, but at some point make it much more likely that you can electrocute yourself. I just don't want that, obviously. So a good find, and that's this afternoon's job. It's Friday today, so this afternoon I'm going to do some 3D printing and designing, and then I'll update you how I'm getting on. Thank you. Good morning. So it's Saturday morning now, and I've been designing my 3D bits that I need, and if I show you here, this is my BMS, and see the black thing on there. I've made that, and I've actually made it such good specifications that I can't get it off. I've put it on and it ain't coming off. So that's going to isolate the BMS from the car. Now, I did debate putting little noggins that it could slot through or screw on, but I didn't fancy the plastic being strong enough to hold it. So actually I've got some very, very strong contact adhesive that I will contact adhesive it in place, and then I'll be able to wire it all back up again and then start doing my testing again. I've also designed a cover for the inverter, if I show you on the screen there. So that's where the two slots are, the two slots down to the inverter, And I think I might make a cover for it that you put a cover on as well, or I might actually just use gaffer tape. I know it doesn't look very good, but it's just to stop muck and detritus getting in there. But the actual print there is going to stop the connectors from maybe coming loose and slipping sideways and obviously making contact with each other. So that's the main purpose of that. Whether I make a cover then that goes over to make it really neat, or as I say, a bit of tape, I don't know. Anyway, I'm going to let that print and I'll get back to you in a minute. Hi, it's Dave, and it's now Sunday. I spent most of yesterday chasing phantom voltages. So obviously I just mentioned a minute ago that I've put the BMS isolated, that's all plugged in, but I'm still getting a voltage between pretty much any contact of the high voltage. So it could be the two separate bits, the batteries in the front and the back, either positive or negative of any of the 4 contacts I have for them, even though they're not wired in together or wired into anything else. A connection between that and the chassis would give me a voltage, and that was just driving me insane. So like, why are these batteries earthed on the shell, and that's earthing through the aluminium, through the chassis? But spoke to some people who know a bit more about electronics than I do, and it's not uncommon, because what I've got here are 2 totally separate circuits, a high voltage circuit and a low voltage circuit. They don't share a common earth, and because they don't share a common earth, if you try and take a voltage reading between them, then you're just going to get some arbitrary floating voltage, because your multimeter can't really work out what's going on. There isn't actually a potential difference, which is why when I haven't got a voltmeter on plugged in again, but when you do it, you get this voltage that then just drops to 0, because there's nothing there really. Now, the original problem I had with much higher voltages, like 100, 120, 130, 140 volts, that's because of the BMS, but that's now sorted. The voltages are much lower, but I get these kind of like 10 volts, 20 volts. If I take a reading, it's not genuine. It's just floating voltages, because there's no common earth. The 2 circuits are separate. So I'm going with that. If anybody knows different, let me know. But I've checked everything. There's no way I've got a bleed, a leak, a loose cable, a fray. It's all brand new for a start, but I have checked everything and it's all good. So I'm now, what am I doing? Plugging it all in, which is all plugged in. So all the high voltage circuits. And I'm just about to, got this up here now, so that's my connector cover now. It's not a cover at the moment, it is just a border to stop my connectors from slipping sideways. So actually I'm just going to plug these 2 in, and I've checked all the 12 volt stuff works, all the relays work, I've checked everything that I can. I'm going to fire up the high voltage and see if I can just get the wheels to spin as they did before, but autonomously. There'll be no cables coming in and out of the car at all, because before I had everything on the bench and the motor in the car. It's all in the car now. It should just work as it did, but well, we'll see in a minute. So I've got my long-suffering wife here videoing the inaugural coming out. She's stood to one side because, well, I guess it's quite likely I might run her over, but anyway, see how it goes. Take that as a win.
Woo!
So it moved, but then of course it rolled down the rest of it. So I think I'm going to move the van out of the way here and give ourselves a little bit more playtime. What a success. Well, what a milestone. I mean, it's been a lot of work, and there she is. Not inside the workshop, she is outside the workshop. So the little rolling about you saw there, I tried first gear and third gear in reverse, obviously, all worked fine. Yeah, wow, okay, I'm now going to tidy and clear up my workshop, which is, I don't know if you will see it on camera, utterly just full of crap and stuff. And it makes, wow, I just don't like muck and crap and stuff. And it's joined to the house, so I keep traipsing stuff back into the house. So I'm going to have a good sweep, wash, clean, and even my cat has come to celebrate seeing what's going on. You alright, Gizmo? He's very happy that the car has left the garage. So anyway, I'm going to publish this. Thanks for all your support. Major milestone. And, well, lots to do still. Cheers.